When my husband came home unexpectedly and found me on the floor surrounded by our 15 children, I thought I would finally be saved. But he looked at the boys and said, "I leave for 1 week, and this is all you managed? She's still conscious." That's when I discovered that hell had 16 demons, not 15. Hello there, my dear ones. What a joy to have your company here with me this afternoon. Please make yourselves comfortable, grab a cup of coffee, because the story I'm going to tell you today is one of those that weighs heavy on the heart, but also teaches us so much about the strength we never knew we had inside us. My name is Rose Patterson, but you can just call me Rose. That's how everyone knows me here. I'm 76 years old, born and raised in a small town called Cedar Falls, there in rural Tennessee, right near the Kentucky border. You know those little places that have more cattle than people? Well, that was it. Today I still live here in Cedar Falls, in a simple little house full of love, very different from the life I had for many, many years. Every day I wake up early, when the rooster is still crowing at the neighbors, and the first thing I do is water my plants. I have a little garden in front of the house that's my pride and joy, honey. Roses, geraniums, snake plants to ward off the evil eye, those little things. After I finish taking care of my little plants, I make my coffee with cream, nice and hot, get my bread with butter, and sit there on the porch to watch the day break. It's in those moments, looking at the sky dawning, that I thank God for every day I live in peace. You know how I started this routine with plants? It was right after I managed to get out of that life I'm going to tell you about. I was living in a little rented room, alone for the first time in my life, not really knowing what to do with myself. A very good neighbor, Mrs. Teresa, gave me a little fern cutting and said, "Rose, take care of this little plant the way you should have been taken care of." I cried so much that day, honey, but I took care of that fern with all the love in the world. And when I saw it growing, sprouting new leaves, green and beautiful, I understood that I could bloom again too. Since then, I've never stopped growing my little plants. Today I have more than 30 little pots scattered around the house. I'm sitting here in my rocking chair, that wooden one that creaks nicely when you move. I have a crocheted blanket that I made myself covering my legs, because even in the heat here, this old lady already feels a little chill in her joints. On the side table, I have my rosary, my reading glasses, and a photograph of my grandchildren. The grandchildren I chose to have in my heart, not those by blood who caused me so much pain. I'll explain that better in a little bit. Before I continue, I'd like to make a special request to you watching me now. If Grandma Rose's story here is touching your heart, please subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and hit that like button, okay, my love? This helps so much so that other people who need to hear this message can also find me. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos from this doting grandma here. Oh, and tell me here in the comments, from what corner of America are you watching me? And at what time of day did you find this video from Grandma? Early in the morning with coffee, in the middle of the afternoon, or already in the evening after dinner? I read all the comments, believe me? And I get so happy knowing where you're from and when you take time to listen to this old lady's stories. Tell me, okay? Let's create a chain of love from north to south of this great country. Now, taking a deep breath here, I need to talk about the subject that brings me here today. My dear ones, for many years of my life, I lived in a big house on an isolated farm, married to a powerful man. I had 15 children. 15, can you imagine? But this wasn't a story of a happy, large family like you might be thinking. It was a story of survival, of silent pain, and of a day when everything changed, when I discovered a truth that broke my heart in half, but also gave me strength to be reborn. So grab another coffee there, get settled in your chair, because this story begins back in my girlhood days when I didn't even imagine what life had in store for me. I was born in 1949, right at the end of June, when winter was starting to bite here in rural Tennessee. My mother, Linda, used to say that it was so cold that night, and she was afraid I wouldn't make it. I was so tiny. But I did, thank God. I came into the world in our humble little house, with dirt floors and wooden walls, with the help of the village midwife, Mrs. Zoe, who smelled like medicinal herbs, and had hands as steady as old tree roots. My father, Robert, was a traveling salesman. He spent more time on the road with his truck loaded with merchandise than at home with us. He carried coffee, beans, flour, sometimes cured ham, from here in Cedar Falls to neighboring towns. He was a man of few words, thin as a fishing rod, with skin weathered from so much sun. When he was home, he'd sit on the wooden stool at the kitchen door, roll a cigarette, and stay there smoking quietly, looking at nothing. He was never one for conversation, never one for affection, but he also never raised a hand to me or my siblings. He was just absent, you know, like we were part of the house's landscape, like the table, like the pots hanging on the wall. My mother was the opposite. Linda was all affection, all care, short, plump, with those red cheeks from living near the wood stove. She always wore a printed cotton dress, an apron over it, and a scarf tied on her head. She took care of everything: the house, the garden, the chickens, me and my 3 siblings. I was the second oldest. There was Robert Jr., who was 2 years older than me, then Linda Jr., 3 years younger, and finally Robert III, the baby, who was born when I was about 8 years old. You know what I noticed, honey? All of us carried our father's Robert or mother's Linda in our names. Robert, Linda, Robert Jr., Linda Jr. I, Rose, was the exception. My mother told me, years later, that she had insisted so much on giving me the name of her grandmother, Rose, who was Irish and had come to America on a ship when she was a young woman. My father had grumbled, but let it be. I think it was the only wish of my mother's that he respected in his whole life. We lived in a little house with only 3 rooms. There was the kitchen, which was where life happened, with the wood stove that my mother lit every day before sunrise. The smell of burning wood, of brewed coffee, of day-old bread heating on the griddle, that was the smell of my childhood. There was the living room, which we only used when visitors came, with 2 long wooden benches, a little table in the middle, and a picture of the Virgin Mary hanging on the wall, always with a little sprig of dried rosemary in front. And there was the bedroom, where we all slept piled together. My parents in a double bed that creaked, me and my sister Linda Jr. on a straw mattress on the floor, and my male siblings on another mattress on the other side. There was no door separating anything. We heard everything. Father's heavy breathing, his snoring, the low conversations in the early morning. I learned from an early age to sleep lightly, always alert. Our routine was simple and heavy. My mother woke up first, before the rooster crowed. I'd hear her getting up slowly, dragging her bare feet to the stove. Soon came the sound of wood being broken, the match striking, the fire starting to crackle. When the smell of coffee reached the bedroom, it was time to get up. I had to help Mother with breakfast, fetch water from the well, sift the cornmeal, feed the chickens. My sister Linda Jr. was still too small to help, so she'd play in the yard while my mother and I worked. After breakfast, which was just bread with lard and coffee with lots of brown sugar, I'd go to the backyard to help Mother wash clothes in the stone basin. That basin was cold, honey. The water came straight from the spring behind the hill, and it was so cold it left our fingers red and stiff. But we scrubbed anyway, with that ash soap Mother made, and wrung it hard until the clothes were almost dry. Then we'd hang them on the barbed wire line that Father had strung between 2 trees. Only around 10 in the morning, when the sun was already high, did I have a little time to play. I'd play with the neighborhood girls. There was Clara, Nancy, and Teresa, who were my best friends. We'd play house under the big persimmon tree that was on Mr. Walter's property, the neighbor. We'd make little stoves out of bricks, little pots from old tin cans, and food from leaves and dirt. Clara always wanted to be the mother because she was the most bossy. I was usually the oldest daughter who had to take care of the younger siblings. Funny how play imitated life, right? Other times, we'd play hide and seek in the middle of the cornfield that surrounded the houses. We'd run between the corn stalks, hide behind the trees, scream when we were caught. We'd come home all dirty with red dirt, with leaves in our hair, and get scolded by Mother. But it was worth it. Those were the only moments when I felt like a real child, you know? light, free, without obligation. There was one day, I must have been about 7, when Clara and I found a bird's nest that had fallen on the ground. There were 3 little blue eggs inside, so perfect they looked painted. We were enchanted. We carefully took the nest to my house, and my mother helped us put it in a little box lined with cloth, near the stove to keep it warm. I spent days taking care of those little eggs, waiting for them to open. But they never opened. One day my mother explained, with that gentle voice of hers, that the birds inside had already died, that without the heat of the mother bird, there was no way to survive. I cried so much that day. I cried for the birds, but I think I also cried for a sadness I couldn't even explain properly at the time. When I turned 9, I started noticing things that had gone unnoticed before. I noticed that my mother was always tired, always with that expression of someone carrying an invisible weight. I noticed that when my father came back from trips, she became tense, spoke quietly, moved around the house on tiptoe as if she wanted not to be noticed. My brother Robert Jr. started to become like my father, quiet, serious, bossy with me and Linda Jr. He was only 11, but he already talked to us the way grown men talk to women, giving orders, expecting to be obeyed. One night, I must have been about 10, I woke up to a strange noise coming from my parents' room. It was my mother crying softly, in that muffled way of someone who doesn't want to be heard. I heard my father's voice, thick and irritated. "Shut that mouth, Linda! You're making a scene over nothing!" Then silence. I lay there on my straw mattress, with my heart tight, not knowing what to do. The next morning, my mother had a swollen eye. She said she had bumped into the closet door in the dark. But I was old enough to know that closet doors don't leave bruises like that. It was around this time that talks about my marriage began. I hadn't even turned 12 yet, but my mother was already talking, all excited, about a young man from town who had seen me at Mass and had asked my father about me. "He's a good man, Rose. He has land, he has cattle. He'll take good care of you." I didn't understand why I needed to marry so early. Clara was also already promised, Nancy too. It seemed like that's what they expected from us, to grow up fast, become someone's wife, take care of house and children. This young man was named Augustus. He was 28 when he met me. I was 11. He was tall, strong, with a thick mustache and the manner of someone who commands. He wore a white shirt always well pressed, a leather hat, and came to our house riding a bay horse that gleamed in the sun. He brought gifts for my mother, a piece of fabric, a pound of refined sugar, things we weren't used to having. My father became all important when he appeared, offered coffee, made conversation about cattle and land business. Augustus looked at me in a way that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't the look of someone who sees a child. It was the look of someone who's evaluating, measuring, choosing. He'd smile, show his white teeth and say, "This girl is going to be a beautiful woman." And hard-working, just like her mother. My mother would be all proud. I'd just feel embarrassed, wanting to disappear. At 12 years old, my parents announced that I was going to marry Augustus as soon as I turned 13. They said it was a blessing, that I was going to have a good life, that I would never want for anything. My mother cried the day she told me, but they were tears of joy, she said. "You're going to have everything I never had, my daughter." A big house, pretty clothes, plenty of food. I wanted to ask, and love, Mother, and the desire to study, to know the world. But I didn't ask. Girls didn't ask those things back then. I married Augustus 3 days after my 13th birthday, on a Thursday morning, at the little church in Cedar Falls. It was July 1962, and it was bitterly cold. I remember I was shivering at the church door, but it wasn't just from the cold, my dear ones. It was from fear. Fear of leaving my mother's house, fear of that man I barely knew, fear of what was to come. I wore a white dress that my mother had sewn for weeks, working by lamplight after everyone went to sleep. It was simple, cotton, with some little embroidery on the hem and collar. My mother had cried when she dressed me that morning, arranging my hair pulled back in a bun that pulled at my scalp. "You look so beautiful, my daughter, so grown up." But when I looked in the broken little mirror she was holding, I saw only a scared girl with eyes too big for her thin face. The ceremony was quick. Father Oscar said some words in Latin that I didn't understand. Augustus put a thin ring on my finger. It was too big. It kept spinning. And that was it. I was a married woman. I was 13 years old and 2 weeks old. Augustus's farm was about 8 miles from my parents' house, in an even more isolated region. We got there by wagon in the middle of the afternoon. I remember the big wooden gate, the dirt road that went up between the pastures, and the house. My God in heaven, that house. It was huge compared to the little house where I grew up. It had 2 floors, 8 rooms, a porch in front and back. It was painted white with blue windows and had a huge yard surrounded by persimmon, guava, and lemon trees. "It's all yours now," Augustus said, with that manner of someone giving a valuable handout. "You're the lady of this house. You'll take good care of it, won't you?" I nodded, still dizzy from it all. Lady? I didn't feel like a lady of anything. I felt like a doll that had been moved from one shelf to another. In the first months, Augustus was different from what I expected. He wasn't affectionate, never was. But he also wasn't violent. He was just distant, busy. He'd wake up before sunrise, go out to take care of the cattle, the fences, negotiations with other farmers. He'd come back at night, eat in silence the dinner I prepared, with the help of Mrs. Eugenia, the old cook who already worked on the farm before me, and then sit on the porch to smoke and drink whiskey until bedtime. The nighttime part, honey. The nighttime part was what hurt me most. He'd enter the room, blow out the lamp, and do what a husband does with his wife. But there was no conversation, no care. It was mechanical, quick, painful. I'd lie there, looking at the dark ceiling, waiting for it to end. When it ended, he'd turn over and sleep. I'd stay awake, with my hands gripping the sheet, feeling my whole body ache, and crying softly until sleep came. At 14, I got pregnant with my first child. Augustus was happy in a way I had never seen. He called his friends to celebrate, killed a pig, made barbecue. "It's going to be a boy," he announced to everyone, beating his chest. "It's going to be my heir." I secretly hoped it would be a girl. I thought that if it was a girl, maybe he'd be less interested, would leave me alone for a while. But a boy was born. In May 1964, after labor that lasted almost 20 hours, little Augustus was born. Just like that, little Augustus. They didn't even ask me what name I wanted to give. Augustus decided, and that was it. When they put that little baby in my arms, I felt something strange. It was my son, had come from inside me, but at the same time seemed to belong more to the father than to me. Augustus would pick him up, lift him for everyone to see, say, "This one here is going to be strong like his father. He's going to command all this land someday." I barely finished my postpartum period and was already pregnant again. And again. And again. Between 1964 and 1978, I had 15 children. 15. 13 boys and 2 girls. All the names chosen by Augustus, Augustus Jr. Edward, Walter, Edgar, Ronald, Claude, Adam, Joseph, Edison, Walden, the girls Edith and Valerie, and then 3 more boys, Claude Jr., Edmund, and Reginald. With each child that was born, my body became more tired, more worn. I had deep stretch marks on my belly, sagging breasts from so much nursing, my back aching constantly. At 29, I looked like I was 50. Mrs. Eugenia, poor thing, tried to help me. She'd make herbal tea to give strength, massage my back, take care of the boys while I rested. "You need to tell your husband to stop, child," she'd whisper. "Your body can't take any more." But how could I talk? A husband wasn't to be contradicted. He was to be obeyed. Augustus governed the house with an iron fist. He had rules for everything. Coffee had to be on the table at exactly 6 in the morning. His shirt had to be ironed without a wrinkle. The children had to be quiet when he was home. "I don't want to hear noise from brats," he'd say. "If I hear it, you're the one who gets it." And he kept his word. Any crying, any running around, any fight between the boys, I was the one who got scolded. Sometimes just scolding, the kind that humiliates, that makes you feel smaller than an ant. Other times, when he had been drinking more, it was slaps, hair pulling, pushing against the wall. But the worst, my dear ones, the worst wasn't even what he did to me. It was what he was teaching our children. I saw, clear as day, the seed he was planting in those boys. From little on, he repeated, "Men command, women obey. Men are strong, women are weak. You have to put authority in your house, or it becomes chaos." Augustus Jr., the oldest, at 8 years old, already talked to me the way his father talked. "Mom, bring my plate here." "Mom, did you heat my bath water?" He didn't ask. He ordered. When the boys reached 10, 12 years old, it got worse. They began to imitate their father in everything. In the way they walked, in the way they talked, in the way they looked at me. It was as if I stopped being a mother and became a maid, or worse. I became an object that was there to serve, to clean, to cook, to get beaten when things didn't go the way they wanted. There was something that happened, and that took me a while to understand properly. Augustus traveled a lot. He had cattle business in several cities in the region. He'd go to Asheville, to Knoxville, to Bristol. Sometimes he'd be gone for a week. I thought that when he left, the house would be lighter, calmer. In the first years, it even was. But as the boys grew up, everything changed. The first time I noticed something was very wrong was when Augustus Jr. was about 15. His father had traveled on Monday to Knoxville, was only coming back on Saturday. On Tuesday morning, I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, beans, rice, stewed pork. The older boys, Augustus Jr., Edward, Walter, and Edgar, came into the kitchen all together. They had an expression on their faces that gave me chills. "Mom, Dad said that when he's not here, we're the ones who command here," Augustus Jr. said, crossing his arms. He was already bigger than me, strong, with the face of a grown man. "Of course, my son," I replied, stirring the pot. "You're the men of the house when Dad's not here. You can rest assured that I'll take care of everything properly." "It's not that," Edward continued. He was 13. "We don't just want you to take care. We want you to obey, just like you obey Dad." My heart started beating faster. "But I do obey, my son. Don't I obey?" That's when Augustus Jr. came close, so close I could smell his sweat. "You talked back to Dad last week. We heard. You said you were tired. Dad didn't like it." He paused, and his eyes became hard. "We're not going to tolerate disrespect either." Before I could respond, Walter took the wooden spoon from my hand. "Go to the living room. We want to talk to you." It wasn't a request. It was an order. My boys, whom I had carried in my womb, whom I had nursed, whom I had rocked to sleep, were giving me orders as if they were my owners. I went to the living room with trembling legs. They surrounded me. 4 boys, teenagers, looking down at me, making me feel small. And there, that Tuesday afternoon, with the sun coming through the window cracks and the smell of lunch burning on the stove that I left unattended, my children taught me the first lesson of what would be my life from then on. Augustus Jr. spoke for almost an hour. He said that while Dad was away, they were responsible for maintaining discipline in the house, that I had to obey them the same way I obeyed Dad, that if I failed in any task, they would correct me the way Dad corrected. The other 3 stood there, around, nodding, agreeing with every word. When they finished talking, they sent me back to the kitchen. The beans had overflowed, the meat had stuck to the bottom of the pan. I cleaned everything crying, with my hands shaking so much I broke a plate. The sound of the plate shattering on the floor echoed through the entire house. Seconds later, I heard heavy footsteps coming toward the kitchen. "Mom's breaking things now?" Edward said from the door, with that tone that chilled my soul. "I guess she hasn't learned yet." And that's when, my dear ones, at that moment, with my children looking at me that way, I understood. Hell had just begun. But the worst was yet to come. The worst would be discovering where they had learned exactly what to do to me when Dad wasn't around. The years that followed were the darkest of my life, my dear ones. If I could erase some piece of my memory, it would be this period between 1979 and 1985. But you can't erase it, right? It stays there, engraved in one's soul, heavy as a stone in the chest. The system my children created was simple and cruel. Every time Augustus traveled, and he traveled more and more, sometimes twice a month, the boys took control of the house. In the beginning, it was just the four oldest, Augustus Jr., Edward, Walter, and Edgar. But as the others grew up, they joined the group too. When it got to 1983, there were already 9 teenage and grown boys living in that house. 9 against 1. They had rules, absurd rules that changed according to their will. One day, I had to serve lunch at exactly noon. If I was 5 minutes late, there was a consequence. Another day, they decided that clothes had to be ironed and folded in a specific way, with the fold turned in, not out. If I made a mistake, there was a consequence. The dishes had to be washed and put away before 8 at night. The porch floor had to be swept 3 times a day. The food couldn't have too much salt, nor too little salt. It had to be at the exact point they liked. And you know what the consequence was, honey. It was what they called a correction session. They'd call me to the living room, the same living room where I had received visits from my mother years ago, where there were pictures of saints on the wall, where it should be a family place. But that living room had become my tribunal. They'd sit on the benches and chairs, forming a semicircle. I'd stand in the middle. Augustus Jr., who was the leader, always started. "Mom, you failed today. Do you know where you failed?" Sometimes I knew, sometimes I didn't. But my answer didn't matter. They had already decided what my punishment would be. It started with words, humiliations. "You're incompetent. You're not even good enough to take care of a house. Dad should have married another woman, one who was worth something." Each word was like a slap. I'd stand there, head down, biting my lip not to cry, because if I cried, they'd say I was being dramatic, and then it would get worse. After the words came the physical punishments, slaps with shoes. They'd take off their shoes and hit, on my back, on my legs, on my arms. They didn't hit my face because it would leave marks, and when Dad came back, he would see. They had this care, you know? This cold calculation of how to hurt without leaving visible evidence. Belt lashes, too. Edward was the one who most liked using belts. He'd wrap the end around his hand and crack it in the air before hitting my back. The sound alone made me tremble before the pain even came. There was one time, it was winter of 1981, when I burned the beans. I was so tired that day, I had spent the night awake with Reginald, who had a fever, that I ended up dozing off standing up, leaning on the kitchen counter, while the beans cooked. When I woke up to the smell of burning, it was too late. The pot had stuck, the beans had turned to charcoal. The boys called me to the living room. There were 7 that day. The older ones were already 20, 19, 17 years old. Grown men, strong. When I entered the living room and saw them all there, I felt my legs weaken. "You burned the food," Augustus Jr. said, with that cold voice he had learned from his father. "We're going to go without lunch because of you. Do you think that's fair?" "No, my son. Sorry. I'll make another one. I'll make another one real quick," I begged. "You're not going to make anything," Walter replied. "You're going to learn not to waste food." He got the burned pot from the kitchen, still smoking, and put it in front of me. "Eat it." I looked at him without understanding. "What do you mean, my son?" "Eat the burned beans. Since you made it, you eat it." My dear ones, I tried to explain that I couldn't, that it was too burned, that it would make me sick, but they insisted, and when I refused, they got the shoe. They beat me so much that day that I couldn't lie on my back for 3 days. Mrs. Eugenia, poor thing, cried while putting ointment on my wounds. This isn't right, Miss Rose. This is no way for a son to treat his mother. But what could we do? She was an employee. I was a hostage. Neither of us had anywhere to run. The worst of all, and this hurts me to tell even today, was seeing my two daughters growing up in the middle of that. Edith and Valerie, my girls. I prayed every day that they would stay blind to that violence, that they wouldn't get used to it. But how could they not get used to it, right? They saw their brothers treating me that way, saw their father treating me that way, and learned that that's how it worked. That men command, women bow their heads. Edith, when she turned 15, was promised to a farmer from Bristol, a 40-year-old man, widower, with 3 children. I tried to talk to her, tried to warn her. My daughter, don't accept this marriage. Run away, go live with your aunt in Nashville. But she looked at me with contempt. Mom, you're weak. I'm not going to be weak like you. I'm going to marry a good man and be respected. She married in 1982, and I never heard from her again. They say she disappeared a few years later. To this day, I don't know if she's alive or dead. Valerie left home at 16, ran away with a trucker who passed through the region. She left a note under my pillow. Mom, sorry, but I can't stand this house anymore. I'd rather take my chances out there than stay here. When the boys discovered she had run away, guess who got beaten? Me, as if I was to blame for my daughter escaping the hell they themselves had created. The isolation was complete. I couldn't leave the farm. There was no telephone, no car, no way to ask for help. My mother had died in 1980 from a stroke. When I went to the funeral, I came back knowing I had lost the only person in the world who truly cared about me. My father had already died years before. My siblings had their own lives, their own problems. No one knew what happened inside that big, beautiful house, surrounded by fruit trees and green pasture. From the outside, it was paradise. Inside, it was hell. There was one day that marked me a lot, my dear ones. It was Augustus Jr.'s birthday, in May 1984. He was turning 20. Augustus had come back from a trip just for the celebration. We killed a steer, made barbecue, invited half the town. The house was full of people, music, laughter. I served everyone, brought beer, brought meat, cleaned tables. Nobody noticed I was limping. I had gotten a belt lash on my thigh 2 days before because Edward's clothes hadn't dried in time. At the end of the night, when they were all drunk, Augustus Jr. stood on a chair and made a speech. He talked about his father, about how he was a man of respect, an example. He talked about his brothers, about how they were united and strong. And then he looked at me. And I thanked my mother, who always took care of us, who always kept the house in order. Everyone applauded. I forced a smile, waved. Inside, I was bleeding. Later that night, when the guests left, Augustus called me to the room. I thought he was going to want what a husband wants. But no. He sat on the edge of the bed, lit a cigarette, and said, "You're too thin, Rose. You look sick." People commented. "That makes me look bad, understand? You need to take better care of yourself." I stayed quiet. He continued. "And the boys said, you've been failing in your duties when I'm not here. That can't continue. I can't travel worried, thinking the house is going to become chaos." I took a deep breath and risked, "Augustus, the boys. They're very hard on me. They treat me badly when you leave." He took a long drag on his cigarette, looked at me, and laughed. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a laugh of scorn. "Hard. Rose, they're men. Men need to learn to command, and you need to learn to obey, which is your role." He put out the cigarette in the ashtray and got up. "If you can't handle it, that's your problem. Straighten yourself out." That night, lying in the dark, I understood something terrible. There was no salvation. There was nowhere to run. There was nobody who would listen to me. The whole world thought I had a blessed life, married to a rich man, 15 healthy children, big house. Who would believe that inside those walls I was less than nothing? That my own children, whom I had generated and raised, treated me like a work animal that gets beaten when it doesn't work properly? I began to have bad thoughts, thoughts of ending it all at once. I'd look at the deep well in the yard and think, would there be time to fill my lungs with water before someone pulled me out? I'd look at the big knife in the kitchen and think, would it hurt a lot? But then came the guilt, the religion my mother had put in my head since I was little. Suicide is a mortal sin, Rose. Those who kill themselves go to hell. And I thought, I'm already in hell. Could there be one worse than this? In 1985, I was 36, but looked 60. My hair had started to turn gray, my teeth were falling out. I had already lost 3. My skin was yellowish, full of purple spots that never completely disappeared. I weighed 95 pounds. Mrs. Eugenia forced me to eat, put the plate in front of me, and stayed there until I finished. You need strength, Miss Rose. You need to endure. Endure for what? I thought. But I ate, mechanically, without tasting anything. It was that year that the worst happened. The moment that, to this day, when I close my eyes, still makes me tremble. It was a Saturday afternoon. August, chilly. Augustus had traveled on Thursday, was only coming back on Monday. The boys had invented a new rule. I couldn't sit during the day. I had to stay standing, working all the time. If they caught me sitting, I got shoe lashes. I was exhausted. I had spent the dawn washing clothes. They dirtied clothes on purpose, I'm sure, just to give me more work. My legs were swollen, the varicose veins throbbing with pain. At 3 in the afternoon, I couldn't take it. I sat on a little stool in the kitchen just for a minute, just to rest. I closed my eyes, and sleep came quickly, in that heavy way of someone who's at their limit. I woke up to a scream. It was Joseph, one of the middle ones, who had entered the kitchen and seen me sleeping sitting down. "Look at this. The lazy one is sleeping on the job," he called the others. They all came. 11 boys, because the 3 youngest were still children and were playing outside. 11 of my children surrounded me in that kitchen. "Are you making fun of us, Mom?" Augustus Jr. said, and there was real anger in his eyes. "We make rules, you ignore them. We correct, you don't learn. I think we've been too soft." He looked at his brothers. "Today she's going to learn for real. My dear ones, what happened that afternoon I won't describe in detail because it still makes me sick to remember. But I'll say that I screamed so much my voice went hoarse, that Mrs. Eugenia locked herself in the back room and prayed the whole rosary out loud so she wouldn't hear my screams. That when it was over, I was on the kitchen floor, curled up, with my whole body aching, my mouth bleeding, and with the certainty that I was going to die there, in that house, and nobody was going to cry for me. But I didn't die. The body endures more than we imagine, you know? I stayed in bed for 3 days. Mrs. Eugenia took care of me, hid from the boys that I couldn't get up. She told them I had a fever, a bad flu, that I needed rest. They didn't even care. While I was bedridden, they ate the food Mrs. Eugenia made and thought it was great not having to put up with my incompetence. When Augustus came back on Monday, I had already dragged myself out of bed. I was standing, preparing dinner, pretending everything was fine. He didn't even ask how the week had been. He ate, praised the food, and went to the porch to smoke. Another normal week at the horror farm. It was after that episode that something began to change inside me. It wasn't hope, no. I didn't have hope anymore. It was anger. A cold anger kept deep inside. An anger that said, I'm not going to die here. I'm not going to give them that pleasure. I didn't know yet how I was going to get out of there, but I knew that someday, somehow, I was leaving, even if it was the last act of my life. September 1985 arrived with that dry heat that leaves the earth cracked and the throat rough. It had been 3 weeks since that terrible episode in the kitchen, and I still felt pain in my ribs when I breathed deeply. But I kept standing, kept working, kept surviving. That's all I knew how to do. Survive one more day. Augustus had traveled again, this time to Knoxville, to resolve a land deed issue. He said it would take a week, maybe 10 days. When I heard this, my stomach churned. 10 days. 10 days alone with them. 10 days of correction sessions, of humiliations, of pain. I prayed quietly. God, give me strength. Just that. Just strength to endure. The first days were as always, absurd rules, endless work, punishments for any little thing. On Tuesday, Claude said his shirt smelled bad. It didn't. I had washed it properly, ironed it, folded it. But he said it did, so it did. I took 3 shoe lashes. On Wednesday, Walden thought the meat at lunch was tough. I got more shoe lashes and went without eating, as punishment for wasting good food. On Thursday, Edison tripped over a broom I had left leaning against the wall. "Are you trying to kill me, Mom? Want me to break my face?" he yelled. And there I went to the living room again. But it was on Friday that everything changed. It was on Friday that the last straw fell and the glass that was already cracked shattered completely. It was late afternoon, the sun was already setting, painting the sky that orange-purple that always reminded me of my childhood. I was in the kitchen, finishing washing the dinner dishes. My hands were red and swollen from the hot water, my nails broken from so much pot scrubbing. Mrs. Eugenia had left early. She lived in a little house in the back of the farm. But on Fridays, she visited her sister in town and only came back Saturday morning. The boys were all in the living room, playing cards and drinking beer. I heard their laughter, their shouts when someone won the round. It seemed like a normal gathering of brothers, you know? If someone from outside saw it, they'd think it was nice. United family, having fun. Nobody would imagine what happened in that house. I finished the dishes, dried my hands on the apron, and went to the living room to say I was going to sleep. I always did this, asked permission to sleep, as if I were a child and they were my parents. "Excuse me, my children. May I go rest?" Augustus Jr. looked at me over his cards. He had a strange expression on his face, a mixture of amusement and cruelty. "Wait a minute, Mom. We want to talk to you." My heart raced. Talking was never a good sign. "What is it, my son?" He put down his cards on the table and got up. The others did the same, one by one, until they were all standing, surrounding me. There were 10 that night. Reginald, the youngest, was sleeping. 10 grown men, strong, tall, and me, small, thin, tired. "We were talking here," Edward began, "and we think you're getting too relaxed. You're failing too much. Every day there's something wrong." "I try hard, my son. I swear that—" "Shut up," Walter cut me off. "We didn't ask anything. We're talking. You listen." I stayed silent, trembling. Augustus Jr. continued. "We decided that today the correction is going to be different. More educational. So you learn once and for all." That's when Edgar left the room and came back carrying a bucket. A bucket full of water. My dear ones, when I saw that bucket, something inside me screamed, "Danger." "What are you going to do?" I asked, and my voice came out thin, scared. "Nothing much, Mom," Augustus Jr. said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're just going to kneel here, holding this bucket, until we decide you've learned. It seems like little, right? A bucket of water. But my dear ones, that bucket was heavy. And staying kneeling on the hard wooden floor, with knees that already ached from so much work, with arms stretched out holding the weight. It was torture. I knelt down. I took the bucket. I stretched my arms forward as they ordered. At first I could handle it. But after 5 minutes, my arms began to tremble. After 10, the pain was like fire going up from my wrists to my shoulders. After 15, I was crying, begging, "Please, my children, I can't take it anymore." "Yes, you can," Edward said, drinking his beer calmly. "Women can take a lot. You say so yourself." When the bucket fell, because it fell, my arms couldn't hold it anymore. The water spread all over the floor. The boys exploded. "Look what you did! You wet everything! Now you're going to have to clean it up." They gave me a rag and told me to dry the floor. Still on my knees, dragging the soaked rag, scrubbing each board. My tears dripped on the floor along with the water from the bucket. I was at my limit, at my absolute limit. And it was there, in that moment, drying that floor, hearing my children's laughter, that I had a thought I had never had before. A clear, crystalline thought that cut through all the confusion in my mind. I'd rather die trying to get out of here than die inside here. I finished cleaning. They sent me to the kitchen to make fresh coffee. I went, with wobbly legs, with my whole body aching. I put the water to boil, put the powder in the filter, and while the coffee dripped, I held onto the edge of the stove and thought, how? How do I get out of here? I had no money. I had nowhere to go. I didn't know anyone who could help me. All my family had died or disappeared. The neighbors were Augustus's friends. The whole town respected him and thought I was lucky to be his wife. If I ran away, they'd look for me. They'd bring me back. And then, God in heaven, what would they do to me? I took the coffee to the living room. I served each one. When I got close to Augustus Jr., my hand trembled and I spilled a little on the table. It was by accident. I swear to God it was by accident. But he didn't care about that. He jumped up, took the still hot cup, and threw the rest of the coffee on my blouse. I screamed in pain. The coffee burned my belly, my chest. I ran to the kitchen, tore off my blouse, threw cold water. My skin was red, burning. I collapsed on the floor right there and sobbed so loudly I couldn't stop. All the pain of those years came out at once. I screamed, hit the floor with my fists, spit out words I had never had the courage to say. God, why? Why did you abandon me? Why did you let me suffer so much? I can't take it anymore. I can't. Mrs. Eugenia wasn't there to console me. The boys didn't come to see if I was okay. I stayed alone on the cold kitchen floor with my burned skin, my beaten body, my shattered soul. And it was there, in my darkest moment, that something strange happened. I remembered my mother. Not a common memory, no. It was as if she was there with me. I remembered the day she taught me to plant beans in the garden when I was very little. She had said, "Look, Rose, the seed needs to stay in the dark earth, needs to be crushed, needs to almost die. But that's where new life is born. It's from the bottom of the ground that the little plant comes." Could that be it? Could it be that I needed to reach rock bottom to be able to climb up? Could it be that God hadn't abandoned me but was waiting for me to find strength I didn't even know I had? I got up from that floor. I washed my face in cold water. I put ointment on the burn. I put on another blouse. And I made a decision. I was leaving. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I was. I was going to wait for the right moment. I was going to gather strength, and I was leaving. Even if I died trying. In the following days, I began to pay attention to things I had never paid attention to. Where Augustus kept the money. When the boys slept most soundly. Which door creaked less? I began to hide food, a piece of bread here, a banana there, wrapped in a cloth and hidden under the mattress. I began to think about routes. If I left at dawn by the back road, could I get to the village before sunrise? I told Mrs. Eugenia. On a Sunday morning, when the boys had gone fishing and I was helping her peel cassava, I whispered, "Mrs. Eugenia, I'm leaving." She stopped peeling and looked at me with those old, wise eyes. "When?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going. Will you not turn me in?" She held my hand tightly. "I pray every day for you to have the courage to go, child. And when you go, I'll say I didn't see anything, that I woke up and you had disappeared. But be careful. They're dangerous." "I know," I said, "but staying here is more dangerous." Augustus came back the following Sunday. 10 days of travel. He was tired, dirty from the road, with that smell of sweat and cigarette smoke. He entered the house, greeted his sons, and went straight to take a bath. I prepared dinner, country chicken with rice and cornbread, the way he liked it. The table was set, the food was good, everything was right. We ate in silence. After dinner, he went to the porch to smoke. I started washing the dishes. My mind was racing. Can I leave this week, or should I wait a little longer? What if it goes wrong? What if they catch me? I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear when he entered the kitchen. I only noticed when he spoke, right behind me. "Rose, the boys said you need correction." I froze. I turned slowly. He was there, leaning against the doorframe, with his arms crossed and that expression I knew so well. I've been trying hard, Augustus. I swear I have." "That's not what they say," he replied. "They say you're talking back, lazy, incompetent." He took a step toward me. "I think I've been too soft with you." And it was at that moment, my dear ones, that I did something I had never done. Something that sealed my fate once and for all. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I can't take it anymore, Augustus. Can't take you anymore. Can't take them anymore. You're killing me a little bit every day." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Augustus stared at me, processing what I had just said. And then, to my surprise, he laughed. But it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was the laugh of someone who had just discovered something very interesting. "Really?" he said, dripping venom. "Then tomorrow, when I leave again, I'm going to Asheville to resolve some business. You're going to have the chance to show the boys how well you endure." He came closer, until I could smell his breath on my face. "And when I come back, we'll talk about that loose tongue of yours." He left the kitchen. I stood there, shaking. What had I done? Why had I opened my mouth? Now they were going to be worse. Now. But something inside me had changed. I had told the truth. For the first time in more than 20 years of marriage, I had spoken what I felt. And no matter the price I was going to pay, I had already decided anyway. I was leaving. I was going to wait for him to travel, wait for an opportunity, and leave. I didn't know that the opportunity would come faster than I imagined. I didn't know that Augustus himself was going to hand me, without meaning to, the key to my liberation. And I didn't know that before leaving, I would discover a truth so terrible that it would change everything I thought I knew about that house and that family. On Monday morning, Augustus left for Asheville. He said it would take about 5 days. He had to resolve document issues, sign papers at the notary. When his truck disappeared around the bend in the road, raising that red dust that took a while to settle, I breathed deeply. 5 days. I had 5 days to endure another round of torture with my children, and then I was leaving. I spent that Monday and Tuesday preparing everything. I hid more food. I already had about 3-day-old breads, 2 bananas, a piece of cheese wrapped in cloth. I took an old cloth bag and hid it under the mattress, along with a change of clothes. At night, when everyone was asleep, I'd stay awake planning. I was going to leave at dawn on Saturday. The boys always drank a lot on Friday night, slept late on Saturday. I'd have time to get far before they noticed I had disappeared. Mrs. Eugenia helped me the way she could. On Wednesday morning, she gave me a little money she had saved. It wasn't much. It was 20 old crumpled dollars. But she said, "Take it, my daughter. God knows I wish I could give you more, but it's what I have." I cried, hugging her. "You're the only good person in this house," I said. She squeezed my face with her calloused hands and replied, "You're good too, Miss Rose. Too good for these people. Go and don't look back." The boys, during those days, were worse than ever. It was as if they knew Dad was going to take longer this time and wanted to take advantage. On Tuesday, they made me kneel on corn. They scattered hard corn kernels on the porch floor and made me kneel there for an hour. My knees bled, turned purple, swollen. On Wednesday, Walden invented that the soup had no salt, threw the plate on the floor, and told me to clean it. With my tongue. My dear ones, I cleaned it. I licked that filthy floor, swallowing humiliation along with dirt and spilled soup, because I knew 3 more days. Just 3 more days, and I'd never have to do this again. Thursday came. I woke up with a strange weight in my chest, a bad feeling I couldn't explain. I prayed more than usual, asked for protection from Our Lady. I made coffee, fed the boys, washed clothes, swept the house. Normal routine. But that weight wouldn't go away. It was noon when it happened. I was in the kitchen, preparing lunch, cowboy beans with sausage, white rice, sautéed collard greens. Mrs. Eugenia was next to me, cutting the collard greens very thin, the way the boys liked. We were talking quietly about silly things, the weather getting warmer, the persimmon tree that was loaded with fruit. Normal things that made me forget, for a minute, the hell I lived in. The boys were all in the living room. I heard their noise, laughter, loud conversations, someone pushing furniture. They were having their discipline session, as they called it. Only this time, it wasn't with me. It was with Reginald, the youngest, who was 11 and had been caught stealing candy from the pantry. They were teaching him not to steal. I heard the boys crying, the older brothers shouting. My heart bled, but what could I do? If I interfered, they'd be worse with him, and with me too. Suddenly, the noise stopped. Complete silence. I found it strange. I looked at Mrs. Eugenia. She looked at me. "What could it be?" she whispered. I didn't have time to answer. We heard heavy footsteps on the back porch, the one that led straight to the kitchen. Boot steps. Only one person wore boots like that. Augustus. The door opened. He entered the kitchen, sweaty, with clothes dusty from travel, hat in hand. His eyes swept the environment, me, Mrs. Eugenia, the pots on the stove. Then he looked toward the living room, from where the absolute silence still came. My heart raced. A part of me, that part that still had hope, still believed in miracles, thought, "Thank God, he came back. He's going to see what the boys were doing. He's going to see that they're violent, that they hurt me, that this house has become hell. He's going to save me." Augustus walked slowly toward the living room. I dropped the spoon I was using to stir the beans and went after him with wobbly legs. Mrs. Eugenia tried to hold me back. "Don't go, Miss Rose," she whispered hurriedly. But I had already gone. When I got to the living room door, I saw the scene. Reginald huddled in a corner with a swollen eye and bleeding nose. The other 11 sons forming a semicircle, some holding shoes, others holding belts. All frozen, looking at their father with an expression of shock. They had been caught in the act. The silence was so heavy you could hear each person's breathing. I was standing there at the door, holding on to the doorframe, waiting for Augustus to explode with anger, waiting for him to yell, "Hit the boys, defend me, defend Reginald, end that madness once and for all." Augustus looked at each son, slowly. Then he looked at Reginald crying in the corner. Then he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made me tremble all over. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't anger at the boys. It was disappointment. Disappointment with them, not with me. He turned to Augustus Jr., the oldest, and said with a low, cold voice that cut my soul like a knife, "I leave for 1 week, and this is all you managed?" It seemed like time stopped. I hadn't understood properly what he meant. Augustus Jr. also seemed confused. "Dad?" Augustus pointed to Reginald. "You're wasting time with a brat? Let the kid learn on his own." He paused, and then looked at me, and what came next destroyed my soul. "Where is she? Where's their mother? Why are you leaving her there in the kitchen, calm, when I left you in charge?" My dear ones, it was at that moment that the ground opened up under my feet. It was at that moment that I understood. It wasn't my children who created the abuse system. It was him, Augustus, my husband, their father. He had taught them. He had ordered them. He had created it all on purpose. "But Dad," Edward tried to explain, "we corrected her yesterday. She's obeying properly." She's obeying? Augustus raised his voice for the first time, and everyone cowered. He walked to where I was, pulled me by the arm, dragged me to the middle of the room. I stumbled, tried to balance myself, but he was too strong. He threw me on the floor, there in the middle of that semicircle of children. "Look at her! Look!" The boys looked. I was on my knees on the floor, with my hands resting on the boards, breathing fast, with fear, with pain, with horror. "She's still conscious," Augustus said, and there was contempt in his voice. Pure contempt. "She's still standing, walking, cooking, as if nothing had happened. Do you think this is discipline? Do you think I taught you to go easy?" He turned to Augustus Jr. "You're the oldest. You're responsible when I'm not here, and you're failing. You're letting her boss you around. You're letting her get comfortable." He spat the word comfortable as if it were a curse. I began to tremble, to cry. Not from sadness, from pure horror. Because finally, after all those years, I had understood. My children weren't monsters despite their father. They were monsters because of their father. They weren't rebelling against him. They were obeying him. "Dad, we tried," Walter began. "Tried?" Augustus interrupted. "If you had really tried, she wouldn't be standing here now. She'd be in bed, or better yet, in the hospital." He turned to me, stared at me with hate. "You're enjoying this, aren't you, Rose? You're enjoying seeing my sons fail? You're thinking they're weak, that they won't be able to dominate you? Augustus, please!" I tried to speak, but he cut me off with a shout. "Shut up!" He looked at his sons again. "You'll never be real men if you don't learn this. A woman needs to know her place, and her place is on the ground, serving with fear. If she's not afraid, you're not doing it right." He took the belt from Edgar's waist. "I'm going to show you how it's done, and you're going to learn. Now." My dear ones, what happened in the following minutes I won't describe. Not because I don't remember. I remember every second, every pain, every humiliation, but because some things are too heavy to put into words. What I'll say is that Augustus taught his children while I was there on the floor. He taught where to hit, what to say, how to humiliate. It was a class, a torture class. And my children watched, learned, absorbed every word as if it were gospel. When it was over, I could barely move. I stayed there on the floor, waiting to die, waiting for that pain to stop somehow. I heard Augustus's voice, distant, talking to his sons. "Now you know. When I travel again, I want you to do exactly this. No going easy, no pity. She needs to understand that here you're the ones who command, and that you learned from me." "Yes, Dad." I heard the chorus of voices responding. Footsteps walking away, door slamming, silence. I stayed there, alone in the living room, with my whole body aching, but with a clarity in my mind I had never had before. There weren't 16 demons in that house. There were 15 children and one master demon who had created all the others in his image and likeness. I don't know how long I stayed there. It could have been minutes, could have been hours. When I managed to drag myself to the kitchen, Mrs. Eugenia was sitting in the chair, crying. I heard everything, my daughter. I heard everything. She helped me sit, gave me water, cleaned my face with a damp cloth. "Mrs. Eugenia," I said, and my voice came out firm despite everything. "I'm leaving today, tonight. But you're not in condition." "It doesn't matter," I cut her off. "If I stay one more day, I'll die. Either they kill me or I kill myself. I'm leaving today." She held my hand. "Then I'm going to help you." We spent the rest of the day planning. Augustus had left again. He went to town to resolve something, said he'd be back at night. The boys had gone to take care of the cattle. They'd only be back at the end of the afternoon. It was our chance. Mrs. Eugenia helped me get the bag I had hidden. We put in the food, the change of clothes, the little money. She gave me a few more coins she found saved in an old can. It's not much, but it's what I have. She also gave me a wool blanket. "It's going to be cold at night. Cover yourself well." "And you?" I asked. "They're going to blame you." "Leave that to me," she said. "I'm old. They're not going to do anything to me. And if they do, at least I'll die knowing I saved a life." When the sun began to set and the boys came back from the pasture, I acted normal. I prepared dinner, polenta with meat sauce. I served. They ate, talked among themselves, ignored me. It was as if what had happened in the morning was routine. Normalcy. And for them, it was. After dinner, I did everything I always did. I washed dishes, tidied the kitchen, swept the floor. When I finished, I said goodbye without saying goodbye. "Good night, my children." Nobody responded. I went to the room, lay in bed, waited. Midnight. I got up without making noise. I took the bag from under the mattress. I put on my old shoes. I put on a coat over my clothes. I looked at the bed where I had slept for more than 20 years. I looked at the room where I had been violated, humiliated, destroyed, and I whispered, "Never again." I left through the back door, the one that led straight to the yard. The night was dark, without a moon. Better that way. Nobody would see me. I walked very slowly through the yard, passing by the fruit trees, by the chicken coop, until I reached the back fence. I jumped. Everything hurt, but I jumped. On the other side, the dirt road, the road that led far away. I began to walk, fast. Each step was pain in my beaten body, but it was also freedom. Each meter left behind was one more meter of distance from that hell. I walked, walked, walked. I didn't look back even once. If I looked, I was afraid I'd lose courage. When the sun began to dawn on the horizon, I was already far, about 5, 6 miles. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I just knew I was going far. Far from Augustus. Far from my children. Far from that cursed farm. I walked until I reached a small village. I don't remember the name. There was a church. I sat on the church steps and cried. I cried everything I hadn't cried in those years. I cried from pain, from relief, from fear, from hope. I cried until I had no more tears. It was there that a lady found me. She was going to open the church for 6 o'clock Mass. She saw me sitting there all bruised, with a bag on my back, and asked, "My daughter, are you okay? Do you need help?" I looked at her. She was a lady of about 60, short, with a kind face, and I told the truth. I ran away. I ran away from home. I have nowhere to go. She didn't ask anything else. She just said, "Come with me." This lady was named Teresa. She took me to her house, a simple little house with 3 rooms in the village. She gave me food, gave me a bath, gave me a clean bed. And when I told my story, not everything, but enough, she cried with me. "You were very brave, my daughter, very brave." I stayed at Mrs. Teresa's house for 3 months. She hid me, protected me. I learned later that Augustus sent people to look for me. They went to the city, asked everywhere. But nobody knew anything. Nobody turned me in. After 3 months, with Mrs. Teresa's help, I got a job as a domestic worker in a bigger city, even farther away. That's how I started over, from scratch. With the clothes on my back, traumas in my soul, but with something I hadn't had for a long time. Freedom. The surprise of that day, Augustus coming back, Augustus showing that everything had been planned by him, wasn't just discovering the truth. It was discovering that even after that horrible truth, I still had strength to choose myself, to choose to live, to choose to leave and never look back again. My dear ones, from the time I ran away until today, 40 years have passed. 40 years of rebuilding, of healing, of learning. It wasn't easy, no. There were days I thought about giving up. There were nights I cried until I fell asleep from exhaustion. But I survived. And more than that, I learned to live again. After those 3 months at Mrs. Teresa's house, I got work as a domestic worker in Nashville. It was a bigger city, farther from Cedar Falls, where I thought nobody would find me. I worked in the house of a good family, Mrs. Marlene and Mr. Gerald. They treated me with respect, paid me properly, gave me a little room in the back to live in. I stayed there 7 years. They were years of hard work, but also of peace. Peace I hadn't known for decades. In 1993, I moved to Memphis to work in the house of a retired couple. I stayed there another 12 years, taking care of them until they passed away. Then I worked in 2 more houses, always as a domestic, always saving every penny I could. I never married again, never wanted to. The idea of sharing life with a man gave me chills. I preferred to stay alone, with my freedom, with my peace. It was only in 2010, when I was already 61, that I decided to return to Cedar Falls. I know it seems crazy, right? Going back to the place where I suffered so much. But you know how it is. We age and miss our homeland. Miss the smell of the air, the way the sun hits the mountains, people talking with that accent I'd known since I was little. And I discovered, through an acquaintance, that Augustus had died in 2008. Heart attack. The children had sold the farm and scattered across America. None of them lived in Cedar Falls anymore, so I came back. I bought a simple little house here in the center of town with the money I had saved all those years of work. It's small, but it's mine. All mine. And here I live my days of peace, finally. I wake up every day early, as I always have, but now it's because I want to, not because someone forces me to. I water my little plants, and how my garden has grown. I have my coffee with cream on the porch. I see the neighbors passing by. I greet everyone. The people here know me as Miss Rose, that quiet lady who lives alone and takes care of the most beautiful flowers on the street. I crochet too. I learned by watching videos on the internet. Yes, this grandma here learned to use the computer. My neighbor's granddaughter taught me. I make little doilies, I make table centerpieces, I make blankets. I sell some at the craft fair we have here every Saturday. It's not to make a lot of money, no. It's more to keep my hands and head busy. And to talk with the other ladies who also sell their little things there. It's nice to have friends, you know? To have people who truly care about you. My routine is simple, and I thank God every day for that. I wake up, take care of the plants, make my coffee. I take a bath, get dressed. I like to get dressed, even when I have nowhere to go. I put on a clean little dress, put on a little lipstick. It's a way of saying, I deserve care, I deserve respect. Even if it's just me giving it to myself. In the morning, after coffee, I sit here in my rocking chair and crochet. I have a blanket I've been making for 3 months now. It's big, with colorful flowers, each little square a different color. When I finish it, I'm going to give it as a gift to Mrs. Teresa. She's still alive, still lives in that village. She's already 100 years old, but firm and strong. I visit her every month, take homemade bread, we have coffee together and talk about life. She was my angel on earth, you know. Without her, I wouldn't be here today. In the afternoon, after lunch, which I make just for myself, well prepared, because I learned I deserve good food, I watch my soap opera. I like the 6 o'clock ones, those lighter, more romantic ones. Then I go to the fair when it's Saturday, or I visit some friend, or I just stay here reading magazines, watching television, resting. At night, before sleeping, I pray my rosary. I thank for everything I have, for the little house, for the little plants, for the friends, for my health, which is still good, thank God, despite everything I went through. I thank for having had courage to leave that house. I thank for every day of freedom. I never had contact with my children again. Never wanted to. I know it might seem harsh, but for me, they died that day I discovered the truth. I don't have anger anymore, no. Anger is tiring. Anger makes you sick. But I also don't have desire for reunion, for forgiveness, for those things people think we have to do. I made my peace in my own way, by cutting that past out of my life. But you know what's funny? I have grandchildren now. Not by blood, but by heart. They're the grandchildren of my friends here in the neighborhood. There's little Pete, 5 years old, son of Mrs. Carmen's granddaughter. He calls me Grandma Rose and is always asking for candy. There's little Mary, 7, who loves to stay here at my house watching me crochet. I teach her, help her make the little stitches. There's little Johnny, 3 years old, who calls my house the Flower Grandma's house because he loves to mess with my plants. These children give me a joy I never felt with my own children. Because with them, I can be a real grandmother. A grandmother who gives affection, who tells stories, who makes cookies and lets them lick the bowl. A grandmother who never hits, never yells, never humiliates. A grandmother who protects, who loves, who cares. This is my family now. My friends, my grandchildren of the heart, my little plants, my little house. Is it little? For someone who once had so much, maybe it is. But for someone who had nothing, for someone who lived in hell, this here is paradise. I look out my living room window and see the sunset painting the sky orange and pink. I see children playing in the street. I see neighbors coming back from work. I see life happening out there. And I'm here, sitting in my chair, with my crocheted blanket on my legs, with a cup of lemon balm tea steaming on the side table. I'm at peace. And you know what I've realized in all these years, my dear ones? I realized that the real victory wasn't having run away. The real victory was having learned to live again. It was having looked at that destroyed, broken, hopeless woman and having said, "You deserve good things. You deserve to be happy." And then having fought every single day to make that come true. Today, at 76 years old, I can say with complete certainty, I am happy. Not in the way I dreamed when I was a girl. I don't have a big family. I don't have wealth. I don't have status. But I have something much more valuable. I have myself back. And that, my dear ones, that nobody will ever take from me again. My dear ones, and dear ladies who have accompanied me this far, who have listened to this whole story, I need to say some things that are in my heart. If you're going through something similar to what I went through, if you live in a house where there's no peace, where there's fear, where they hurt you in body or soul, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not alone. And no matter how impossible it seems right now, there is a way out. I know it's difficult. I know it seems like there's nowhere to go, like there's no way to start over, like you don't have strength. I thought all that too. But you know what I discovered? We have more strength than we imagine. We can endure a lot. And when we finally decide we don't want to endure anymore, when we choose our own life, that's when the miracle happens. Not a magic miracle, no. A miracle of courage. A miracle of one step at a time. A miracle of good people who appear along the way to help. I learned in this life that nobody has the right to destroy you. It doesn't matter who it is, husband, son, father, brother, whoever. Nobody has the right to hit you, to humiliate you, to make you feel like you're worth nothing. You are worth something. Worth a lot. Worth everything. I learned that sometimes we need to let go even of those who share our blood, if those people only bring destruction. Family isn't just those born from the same womb. Family is those who care, who respect, who truly love. I lost 15 children, but I gained a family of the heart, and that family saved me. I learned that it's never too late to start over. I was 36 when I ran away. I had my whole body beaten, my self-esteem on the ground, without a penny in my pocket. But I started over. I worked hard, saved money, built a new life. If I could do it, you can too. I learned that life can be good. It can be simple, it can be quiet, but it can be good. It can be a rocking chair on the porch, a cup of hot coffee, a little plant growing in a pot. It can be a child's smile calling you grandma. It can be sleeping at night without fear of waking up getting beaten. It can be freedom. And I learned, mainly, that the most important thing isn't the size of the life we live. It's the quality. It's waking up and knowing you chose that day. It's lying down and knowing nobody hurt you. It's looking in the mirror and recognizing the person who's looking back at you. That's victory. That's overcoming. So, my love, if you're suffering, seek help. Look for someone you trust, a friend, a neighbor, someone from church, someone at work. Look for the authorities in your country, the places that exist to protect people who are in situations of violence. In the United States, for example, there are domestic violence hotlines, there are shelters, there are people willing to help. In other countries, too. Research, get informed, and don't be ashamed to ask for help. Those who should be ashamed are those who hit, not those who get hit. And if you know someone who's going through this, don't turn your back. Don't pretend you don't see. Extend your hand. Be the angel that Mrs. Teresa was for me. You can save a life. You can change someone's destiny. And that, my dear ones, is one of the most beautiful things one human being can do for another. I survived. More than that, I won. I conquered fear, I conquered trauma, I conquered pain. And if I won, you can win too. Believe in yourself. Believe you deserve good things. And fight. Fight for yourself, for your life, for your peace. Now, my dear ones, I'm going to make a special request to you who made it to the end of this video. If this story touched your heart, if you think it can help someone, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and turn on the notification bell. It's important, did you hear? There are so many people suffering in silence, so many people who need to hear that there is a way out, that it's possible to start over. Each subscription, each time you share these videos, is one more person who can be reached, one more life that can be saved. And leave here in the comments one word. Just one word that summarizes what you felt with this story. It can be strength, it can be courage, it can be hope, it can be any word that's in your heart now. I read all the comments, each one of them, and I'm so happy to know this story reached you. Let's create a chain of support, a network of affection and strength for those who need it. Do this now. Don't wait another minute. Someone might urgently need this message, and you could be the instrument to bring hope to that person. And for you who are suffering now while watching this video, I see you. I understand you. I've been where you are, and I'm here on the other side to tell you. It's worth fighting. It's worth surviving. Life can be good again. Believe it. Thank you, my dear ones, for having listened to me this far. Thank you for having opened your hearts to this story so difficult, but also so important. May God bless each one of you. May He bless you with peace, with love, with protection. And may we never forget, we are stronger than we think, and always, always, it's worth choosing life. A kiss in the heart of each one, from Grandma Rose. Until next time, my loves. Dad made me lick the dirty floor of our house every time he found a tiny spot. A good wife needs to know how to use her mouth. Clean it. Now. For 2 years, I tasted wax and humiliation, until the day I prepared a lesson he would never forget. Hello, my dear ones. How wonderful to have you here with me once again. My name is Eliza May Thompson. I'm 84 years old with a life well lived, and I'm here in my cozy little house in Elmwood, Iowa, where I was born and put down roots. This morning, after having my hot coffee, such a delight, isn't it? I decided to sit here in my favorite armchair, the one my late husband Walter gave me as a wedding present 60 years ago, to talk with you. From where I'm sitting right now, I can see my red rose garden through the window. How beautiful! The morning sun is hitting them now, making everything golden. It's in these moments, caring for my little plants, watering each one with love, that I feel most at peace. You know why? Because I learned that everything in life can be transformed with patience and love. My granddaughter Emma, who's 12 years old, always comes to help me on weekends. She's such a sweetheart. She helps me pull weeds, water the plants, and always asks, "Grandma Eliza, why do you say plants understand us?" I explain to her that everything we care for with love responds, flourishes, becomes beautiful. It's a life lesson, isn't it? And you wonderful people who always follow my stories, I wanted to ask a special favor. If you enjoyed what you hear here, Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, okay? It's very important for this grandma here to be able to keep talking with you. And turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our conversations. And tell me in the comments, from which town or city are you watching me? And what time of day did you find this video? In the morning with coffee, after lunch, or in the evening? I always read all the comments and get so emotional knowing where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this old lady's stories. Tell me, will you? Let's create a chain of love that reaches every corner of America. You know, my children, today I want to share with you a very difficult story from my life. A story that for many years I kept to myself, but today I know I need to tell. It's about a very painful time in my youth, when I still lived in my father's house, and I learned in a very cruel way what obedience and humiliation meant. You'll understand why today, when I care for my little plants with so much affection, when I see them grow free and beautiful in the sun, my heart fills with gratitude. Because it wasn't always like this in my life. There was a time when I didn't know freedom, didn't know what it was like to be treated with respect. But let me start from the beginning, so you can understand this whole story. My father's name was Gerald Thompson, a tall man with a trimmed mustache and always very well dressed. He worked as an accountant at a corn processing company here in Elmwood, and he thought he owned the truth. My mother, poor thing, was named Margaret, a petite woman with her hair always pulled back in a tight bun, and she lived on her tiptoes trying not to irritate my father. I had two siblings, Arnold, 3 years older than me, who was always Dad's favorite, and Dorothy, 2 years younger, who died of pneumonia when she was only 8 years old. Our house was on Main Street in Elmwood, a large wooden house with 2 floors and a very steep staircase in the middle. What struck me most about that house was the flooring. All wide oak planks, which my father insisted on keeping always waxed and shining like a mirror. We woke up every day at 5:30 in the morning. Mom would go to the kitchen to prepare coffee, and I had to make my bed, leaving the sheets perfectly smooth, without a single wrinkle. Then I'd go down for breakfast, milk with homemade bread and peach preserves that Mom made. My father always sat at the head of the table, in a suit and tie, even inside the house, reading the newspaper in silence. No one could make noise during his coffee time. After breakfast, Dorothy and I would go to school, a small wooden schoolhouse about 5 blocks from home. I really liked studying. I was one of the best students in the class. My teacher, Mrs. Henderson, always told Mom, "Eliza has a future, Mrs. Thompson. She's very intelligent." But Dad didn't like it much when people said that. He said that women who studied too much became uppity and that a girl's place was learning housework. Our games were simple. Dorothy and I made corn-husk dolls, played house under the big oak tree in the backyard, and on rainy days we'd stay in our room making up stories. I loved telling stories to my little sister. She would listen wide-eyed to my tales about princesses and castles. But life at home had its rigid rules. My father was obsessed with cleanliness and order. Everything had to always be in the right place, without a speck of dust. He inspected the entire house every night when he came home from work. He'd run his finger over the furniture looking for dust, examine the floor inch by inch. If he found anything out of place, he'd yell at Mom in front of all of us. I remember once, I must have been about 10 years old, I dropped some breadcrumbs on the living room floor. Dad saw it and turned red with anger. "Margaret, teach this girl that a clean house is a decent house. A woman who can't keep a clean house is good for nothing." Mom was embarrassed, pulled me by the arm and said quietly, "Eliza, my dear, always clean up after yourself. Your father doesn't like dirt." The housekeeper's name was Mrs. Miller, a very kind, elderly black woman who took care of the heavy cleaning. She taught me to mop the floor, polish the furniture, wash clothes in the backyard wash tub. "Miss Eliza," she would say, "learn these chores well. It's important for a young lady to know." I liked Mrs. Miller because she was affectionate, unlike my father's cold manner. My brother Arnold was lucky to be a man. Dad never demanded from him what he demanded from me and Dorothy. Arnold could leave his muddy shoes at the entrance, could spill food on the floor, and Dad would say, "Leave it, men don't need to worry about these things." But if Mom or I made the slightest mess, he would be furious. When Dorothy died in 1952, I was about 11 years old. It was terrible. She got sick in winter with a cough that wouldn't go away. One day she was playing with me, the next she was burning with fever. Dad delayed calling the doctor because he said it was a girl's fussiness. By the time he finally called, it was too late. After we lost my little sister, the house became even quieter. Mom cried in secret, and I felt very alone. It was around that time that Dad started becoming even more demanding about the house's cleanliness. He said Dorothy's illness had been because of germs and dirt, that from that moment on, the house would have to be perfect, always. It was also after Dorothy's death that Mrs. Miller left. Dad said he didn't need a housekeeper anymore, that I was becoming a young lady and had to learn to take care of a house like a real woman. I remember Mom tried to argue, "But Gerald, Eliza is still studying." He cut her off immediately. Too much studying isn't good for a girl. She needs to learn what really matters. So at 15, I was already responsible for part of the house cleaning. It started small, sweeping the yard, washing dishes, dusting furniture. But Dad always found fault in everything. "This floor isn't shining right, Eliza. There's dust on this baseboard here, girl." A future wife has to know how to do work properly. The way he talked about marriage gave me chills. He always said I had to learn early because otherwise no decent man would want me. Mom would stay quiet when he said these things, but I saw in her eyes a sadness I could never quite understand back then. It was a life of much work and little joy. But I still didn't know that the worst was yet to come. It was in March 1957, right after I turned 16, that my life changed completely. I remember it like it was today. It was a Monday morning. The sun was coming through the kitchen window while I was having my coffee with milk. Dad was more serious than normal, stirring the sugar in his coffee with that little silver spoon he treasured so much. "Eliza," he said, without raising his eyes from the cup, "I let Mrs. Miller go yesterday. Dismissed her for good." I felt my heart jump. Mrs. Miller still came twice a week to do the heavy cleaning since Dorothy died. "But Dad," I managed to say, "she does the general house cleaning." He raised his eyes to me with that cold look I knew well. "You're already a young lady. You're 16 years old. It's time to truly learn what it means to take care of a house. Starting today, you're responsible for keeping this house impeccable. And when I say impeccable, I mean impeccable." Mom was standing at the sink washing the breakfast dishes, but I saw her shoulders tense up. She didn't say a word, just kept scrubbing the same plate over and over. Arnold, who was finishing eating his bread with jam, gave a low chuckle. "Thank God I was born a man," he murmured, finding the situation funny. "And there's one more thing," Dad continued, getting up from the table and adjusting his tie. "A good wife needs to know that the house is a reflection of her. If the house is dirty, it's because the woman is worthless. If it's clean, it's because she has value." He walked over to where I was sitting and placed his heavy hand on my shoulder. "You're going to learn this properly, Eliza. My way." That first day, after Dad left for work and Arnold went to school, Mom explained the routine to me. "My daughter," she said in a tired voice I had never noticed before, "your father is very demanding. You'll have to sweep and mop the entire house every day. The floor has to always be waxed, without any marks. The bathrooms have to shine. And," she paused, bit her lower lip, "if he finds anything wrong, you better fix it quickly." I started that very morning. I swept the whole house, mopped the floor, waxed the hallway and living room flooring. I cleaned both bathrooms until the tiles were shining. I dusted all the furniture, organized every object. When I finished, it was already noon and I was exhausted. That night, when Dad came home from work, he did his inspection. It was his sacred ritual, Every day after dinner, he would walk through the entire house with his hands behind his back, examining every corner. He'd run his finger over surfaces looking for dust, look at the floor looking for stains, check if objects were exactly where they should be. That first night, he found a mark on the kitchen floor, a small shoe mark that I hadn't even seen. "Eliza!" he shouted from the hallway. "Come here." My stomach froze. I went there and he pointed to the mark. "What is this?" "It must be a shoe mark, Dad. I didn't see it." "You didn't see it?" He bent down, ran his finger over the mark. "A future wife who doesn't see dirt on her own house's floor?" He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of contempt and something that scared me a lot. "You know what your grandmother, my mother, used to say, that a good wife needs to know how to use her mouth for more than talking nonsense." I didn't quite understand what he meant at that moment. He told me to get a cloth and soap and clean the mark properly. I knelt on the kitchen floor, scrubbing that little mark until it came out completely, while he stood behind me, watching. The following days were hard, but I thought I was managing. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning to start cleaning before everyone got up. I'd sweep, mop, wax, clean bathrooms. But Dad always found something wrong. A little stain here, a speck there, a piece of furniture that wasn't shining enough. It was on a Thursday 2 weeks later that the first real humiliation happened. I had cleaned the whole house, paid attention to every detail. But when Dad did his nightly inspection, he found some droplets on the upstairs bathroom floor. They must have dripped when Arnold took a shower, and I hadn't seen them. "Eliza, come here!" His shout echoed through the whole house. When I got to the bathroom, he was pointing to the droplets on the floor. "What is this here on the floor?" "They're water droplets, Dad. Must have dripped during the bath." "Water droplets?" He laughed, but it was a joyless laugh. "In a bathroom, droplets turn into mold. Mold turns into disease. Disease kills, just like it killed your sister." My heart squeezed when he mentioned Dorothy in such a cruel way. Then he said the phrase that never left my head. "A good wife needs to know how to use her mouth. Clean it, now." I didn't understand at first. "Clean it with what, Dad?" "With your mouth, girl. That way you won't forget again." And he pointed to the floor. I thought I had heard wrong. "What do you mean, Dad?" "Kneel down there and clean those droplets with your tongue. That way you'll learn to pay attention to the work you do." I felt the world spinning. I looked at him, hoping it was a cruel joke, but his face was more serious than ever. "Dad, I can't." "Yes, you can, and you will." He shouted so loud that Mom came running from the bedroom. "Gerald, what's happening?" "Your daughter doesn't know how to clean properly. She's learning now." Mom looked at me kneeling on the cold bathroom floor, looked at Dad, and lowered her head. "Eliza," she whispered, "obey your father." It was the first time I tasted the bitter flavor of humiliation. Kneeling on the cold bathroom floor, with Dad standing behind me, watching every movement, I licked those droplets from the floor until he said it was enough. The taste of soap mixed with dirty water stayed in my mouth the rest of the night. Lying in bed that night, I couldn't sleep. I cried quietly so Mom wouldn't hear, but inside, a revolt was being born that I had never felt before. And that's when I began to understand that this was just the beginning of something much worse. After that first time in the bathroom, things got worse week after week. Dad had found a new way to control me, and it seemed like he enjoyed the power it gave him. The phrase, "a good wife needs to know how to use her mouth," became the nightmare of my life. No matter how hard I tried, he always found some dirt. A crumb under the kitchen table, a drop of water in the sink, a speck on the living room baseboard. Anything served as an excuse. And it always ended the same way. "Clean it. Now." I remember an April morning, a Friday that forever marked my memory. I had waxed the hallway floor until it was shining like glass. I was proud of my work when Dad came home for lunch, something he rarely did. He walked down the hallway with his shoes dirty from the office dirt, leaving tracks on the freshly waxed floor. "Eliza!" he shouted, feigning surprise. What is this dirt in my hallway? My heart raced. Dad, you just stepped with your dirty shoes. Are you contradicting me? His eyes became dangerous. Are you saying it's my fault? I learned at that moment to never try to explain logic to him again. No, Dad. Sorry. Then clean it. The way you know you have to clean it. I knelt in the hallway while he stood there, watching. The taste of wax mixed with the dirt from his shoes was nauseating. But the worst wasn't the flavor. It was the humiliation of being there, on my knees, while he laughed softly and said, "This way you'll learn to do better work." The weeks passed and the torture intensified. If he found dust on the living room baseboard, I had to run my tongue over it until I cleaned everything. If he found a stain on the kitchen floor, the same ritual. Once, he found a speck behind the bathroom door, an impossible-to-see little spot, and made me clean even that corner with my mouth. The worst of all was that Mom knew what was happening. Sometimes she would stand at the door watching, with tears in her eyes, but never said a word. One night, after a particularly cruel humiliation in the kitchen, she came to my room. "My daughter," she whispered, sitting on the edge of my bed. "I know it's difficult, but you need to obey your father. That's how things work. When you get married, you'll understand." "But Mom," I cried, "this isn't normal. None of my friends' mothers do this to them." "Every family is different, Eliza. Your father wants you to be a good wife. It's for your own good." She stroked my hair. "And never tell anyone about this, you hear? It's family business." My brother Arnold knew too, but for him it was almost entertainment. Sometimes he would leave crumbs on the floor on purpose, just to see me being punished later. Once I heard him telling a friend, "My sister is kind of dumb. She can't clean the house right. My dad has to teach her in the most basic way possible." At school, I tried to act like nothing was happening, but I couldn't concentrate properly. My teacher, Mrs. Henderson, noticed something was wrong. "Eliza," she called me one day after class, "you've been very quiet. Is everything okay at home?" For a moment, I thought about telling everything. I opened my mouth to speak, but I remembered Mom's words. "Never tell anyone about this." I closed my mouth and lied. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Henderson. I'm just tired from housework." "Ah, yes. Your mother mentioned you're helping more at home now. That's good. It's important for a girl to be domestic." Even the teacher thought it was normal. I felt even more alone. The months of May and June were the worst. Dad was getting more and more creative with his humiliations. If he found a stain on the living room floor, it was no longer enough for me to clean just that spot. He made me run my tongue across the entire floor, board by board, until he decided it was sufficiently clean. "A good wife takes care of the entire house, not just a piece," he would say, sitting in his armchair, smoking a cigarette while I crawled across the floor. Once, on a Sunday afternoon, he spilled coffee on the kitchen floor on purpose. I saw him do it, but couldn't say anything. "Oops," he said, pretending it was an accident. "Eliza, there's coffee on the floor here." It was hot coffee. It burned my tongue, but I had to clean every drop while he watched, satisfied with my pain. I started having nightmares every night. I dreamed I was drowning in a sea of wax and dirt, that my mouth was stuck to the floor forever. I'd wake up with a bitter taste in my mouth, even though I hadn't cleaned anything. My body was starting to show signs that it couldn't take it anymore. My tongue was always injured and inflamed. My back hurt from being on the floor so much. My knees were bruised from kneeling so much on the hard floor. But the worst of all was what was happening to my soul. I was losing hope, losing the will to fight. I was starting to believe that this was really normal, that I deserved it, that this was just how things worked between fathers and daughters. One June night, after a particularly cruel humiliation in the bathroom, where he had made me clean the entire floor with my tongue because he found a water drop near the drain, I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the girl staring back at me. My eyes were empty, my mouth was injured, and I looked 10 years older. It was that night that I started to feel something different being born inside me. It wasn't just sadness or fear anymore. It was anger, a deep anger burning slowly but growing every day. It was on a July morning, a cold Saturday in winter, that what changed everything forever happened. Dad had announced on Friday night that on Sunday he would receive important visitors from work. The company manager and his wife were coming to dinner at our house. "Eliza," he said, staring at me with those cold eyes, "tomorrow night this house is going to be perfect. I don't want even a speck of dust, not a mark on the floor, not a speck anywhere. You're going to spend all day cleaning, and then I'm going to inspect every inch. If I find anything wrong—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew exactly what it meant. I spent all Saturday cleaning like crazy. I swept, mopped, waxed, polished, scrubbed every corner of the house. My tongue was already hurting just thinking about the possibility of having to use it again. When night fell, I was exhausted, but the house was shining. On Sunday morning, I woke up early to take one last look at everything. That's when I saw that Arnold had left dried mud on the entrance rug. He had come home late the night before from a friend's house and didn't bother to wipe his feet. I ran to clean it before Dad woke up, but it was already too late. "Eliza!" His shout echoed through the whole house. "Come here now!" I ran down the stairs and found him standing at the entrance, pointing to the rug. There were still some mud marks that I hadn't been able to get out completely. "What is this here?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Dad, it was Arnold who—" "I don't care who it was!" He exploded. "The house is your responsibility. The visitors arrive at 6 o'clock and you left my house dirty." At that moment, something inside me broke. I looked at my brother, who was coming down the stairs laughing quietly, clearly satisfied with what he had caused. I looked at Mom, who was in the kitchen pretending she wasn't seeing anything. And I looked at Dad, with that expression of cruel pleasure on his face. "You know what you have to do," he said, pointing to the rug. "Clean it, now." That's when I had my first rebellion. "No," I said, quietly but firmly. The silence that followed was terrible. Dad stood still, looking at me as if he hadn't understood what I had said. "What did you say?" I said, "No, Dad. I won't clean the dirt that Arnold made." What happened next was the worst of all. Dad grabbed me by the arm so hard he left a mark, dragged me to the kitchen, and pushed me hard onto the floor. "You're going to learn to respect me." He turned on the faucet, filled a bucket with ice-cold water, and threw it on me. Then he grabbed the powdered soap and spread it on the wet floor. "Now you're going to clean this entire floor with your tongue, and you'll only stop when I say you can stop." It was December in Iowa, the cold was bone-chilling, and I was soaked on the cold kitchen floor. But the worst wasn't the cold. It was looking and seeing Mom standing at the door, crying, but doing nothing to help me. It was seeing Arnold laughing as if it were the funniest thing in the world. I spent almost an hour on that floor, shivering from cold, with the bitter taste of soap burning my already injured tongue, while Dad sat in a chair watching me. "A good wife needs to know how to obey," he would say, "and you're going to learn, even if it's by force." When he finally let me get up, I had a raw tongue and my whole body hurt. I went up to my room, locked myself in there, and cried like I had never cried in my life. But it wasn't just crying from sadness. It was crying from anger, from hatred, from a revolt that was consuming me inside. It was that afternoon, while I was in the bathroom trying to heal my tongue with warm water, that I had my first thought about revenge. I looked in the mirror and saw my face swollen from crying so much, my injured mouth, and thought, he can't keep doing this to me. There has to be a way to stop this situation. That night, during dinner with the visitors, I had to serve at the table pretending everything was normal. Dad was all smiles, talking about work, playing the role of an exemplary father. My daughter Eliza is very domestic, he told the guests. She knows how to take care of a house like few girls her age. I smiled and thanked him for the compliment, but inside I was boiling. I looked at him, all pompous at the head of the table, and swore to myself, this won't continue. Somehow, this is going to end. After the visitors left, Dad did his usual inspection. To my surprise, he didn't find anything wrong. I had cleaned everything so carefully that it really was perfect. But instead of praising me, he said, "See how you can do it right when you want to? You just have to apply the right method." Lying in bed that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about his satisfied face when he humiliated me, Arnold's cruel laugh, Mom's omission, and I started planning. I knew where Dad kept the cleaning products, in the laundry room cabinet downstairs, liquid wax, wood oil, soap, everything there. And I knew he had the habit of doing his inspection always coming down the stairs from his bedroom upstairs. It was that early morning, alone in the dark, that the idea started to take shape in my mind. A terrible, dangerous idea, but one that made my heart race in a way I had never felt before. It wasn't fear anymore, it was anticipation. The next day, he announced that on Tuesday night he would bring another important guest to dinner. "And this time," he said, staring at me, "I want this house to be even more perfect than Sunday. You understand?" "Yes, Dad," I replied, lowering my head as I always did. But inside, I was smiling, because I already knew exactly what I was going to do. Tuesday arrived like a day of reckoning. I woke up before 5 in the morning, not because I had to clean, but because I couldn't sleep well for 3 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the scene repeating in my head, Dad coming down those wooden stairs, confident and arrogant as always, not imagining what awaited him. During those sleepless nights, I had reviewed every detail of my plan hundreds of times, imagining every possibility, every failure that could go wrong. During breakfast, he was particularly demanding and pompous. He wore the most elegant clothes he had, navy blue suit, red silk tie, leather shoes that he polished himself every morning. "Eliza, today Mr. Reynolds is coming to dinner here with his wife. He's a very important man from the company, vice president of the branch in Des Moines, and I want this house to be impeccable. Did you understand me?" He tapped the little spoon in the cup as he spoke, making an annoying noise that always bothered me. "Yes, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice calm and respectful, but inside my heart was racing. "You can trust me." "I hope so. Because if anything goes wrong tonight, if he finds even a single speck in this house, if a single detail is out of place." He leaned over the table, bringing his face close to mine with that strong cigarette breath. "You're going to learn a lesson you'll never forget. And this time, it won't just be the kitchen floor. It'll be the whole house, room by room, until I consider that you've truly learned what it means to respect your father." His threat, instead of scaring me, gave me even more certainty that I was doing the right thing. This would be the last time he threatened me that way. "I understand perfectly, Dad. The house will be perfect. It better be. Because my reputation at the company depends entirely on the impression this visit will have of our family. If they see any sloppiness, any sign that I don't know how to educate my own daughter." He didn't finish the sentence, but his look said everything. Mom was quiet as always, stirring her coffee in slow circles, avoiding looking at us. Arnold was eating his bread with jam, making noise on purpose, knowing that it irritated Dad, but that all his anger was directed at me at that moment. As soon as he left for work, 7 o'clock sharp as always, and Arnold went to school, I began executing my plan. First, I cleaned the entire house for real, with a care I had never shown before. I couldn't let anything go wrong because of real dirt or genuine negligence. I swept every corner, even under the heaviest furniture, mopped all the rooms twice, waxed the furniture until they were like mirrors, organized every object as if it were a display in an elegant store. Mom was genuinely impressed with my dedication. "Wow, Eliza, how meticulous. I've never seen you clean with such care. It almost seems like you're enjoying the work. Your father will be very proud when he sees how beautiful the house is." I want everything to be perfect for the important visitors, Mom, I replied, scrubbing the living room table with precise circular movements. Dad said it's a very special opportunity for him at the company. If she only knew I was preparing the most elaborate trap of my life. I prepared lunch with the same care. Well-seasoned pot roast, green beans with bacon, mashed potatoes. I wanted Mom to be completely busy and satisfied, without energy or curiosity to suspect anything strange. I also put extra effort into dessert, making an apple pie that was the house specialty. After lunch, when she went to the backyard to hang the washed clothes on the line and take a look at the plants, the most crucial moment of my plan arrived. Around 2 p.m, with my heart beating like it was going to jump out of my mouth, I went down to the laundry room. Each step on the wooden stairs echoed in the silent house, and I kept stopping to make sure Mom was still out there, humming softly while hanging the sheets on the line. I opened the cabinet where Dad kept the cleaning products with a small key that he thought only he knew where it was hidden behind the large can of powdered soap. But I had seen him get it many times, always making sure to check if anyone was looking before opening. There were the instruments of my revenge, organized as if they were trophies. The can of imported Carnauba liquid wax, which he had specially brought from Chicago because he said it was the best on the American market, superior even to European imports, and the bottle of oak oil, that thick, golden, and viscous oil that he used religiously once a month to nourish and protect the staircase wood, always talking about how that wood had cost a fortune and deserved to be treated like a rare jewel. I took both bottles with hands that trembled with anxiety and determination, and went up to the second floor, stopping at each step to listen for any sign that Mom was coming back inside the house. The staircase was really steep, 15 steps of solid oak wood, the same wood that Dad always bragged about having ordered directly from a sawmill in Wisconsin, paying a price that any sensible man would find absurd. The first 3 steps were strategic. They were where he always stepped with more force and arrogance when he came down to do his nightly inspections, where he made that intimidating noise of hard soles hitting the wood to announce his arrival and start the process of scaring me before even speaking to me. With trembling hands, but driven by an iron determination I had never felt before, I first opened the can of wax. It was a golden liquid wax, scented with Carnauba essence that I normally spread with soft cloths in circular movements and then polished until it was like a mirror. But this time, with calculated and precise movements, I poured a generous amount on the first 3 steps. The dry and porous wood absorbed part of the wax quickly, but a shiny and oily film remained on the surface. Next, I carefully opened the bottle of oak oil. It was a thick, viscous oil, slippery like wet soap, with that strong and characteristic smell of aged wood. Dad always said that this oil was the ancestral secret to keeping the staircase beautiful, durable, and with that special shine that impressed visitors. I poured an even more generous amount over the wax I had already applied, creating a treacherous mixture. The combination of the 2 products created a surface that looked completely normal, shiny and well-maintained as it always looked after my weekly cleanings, but that had the power to take down a bull on first contact. It was like an ice skating rink disguised as a domestic staircase. I spent more than an hour smoothing and spreading the mixture with my hands, distributing it evenly and invisibly, making sure it was homogeneous but deadly. I tested it discreetly with my bare toes. It slipped like oil spilled on a wet floor. Anyone looking from afar or even up close would think it was just the result of exemplary and careful cleaning. But I knew it was an ingenious and lethal trap. After finishing the preparation, I cleaned my hands carefully with kerosene to eliminate any smell of the products that could denounce me, put the bottles back in exactly the same positions where they were before, locked the cabinet, and hid the key again. I returned to the kitchen with a smile on my face that hadn't appeared in many months, and continued the preparations for dinner as if it were just another ordinary Tuesday. I helped Mom season the chicken with a special mixture of crushed garlic, coarse salt, and cumin that she had learned from her grandmother, peeled the potatoes one by one, leaving them all exactly the same size so they would look nice on the platter, set the dining room table with our best china, the one decorated with blue flowers that we only used when authorities or very important people from Elmwood Society came. At exactly 5:30, like a Swiss watch, Dad arrived home. He always came by the same route, wiping his feet on the entrance mat to remove street dust, and going straight to the kitchen to do his preliminary inspection of the preparations and inevitably find something to criticize. "How is dinner coming along?" he asked, already executing his obsessive rituals, running his index finger over the kitchen table, looking for invisible dust, looking inside the pots as if he were a restaurant inspector, checking if the silverware was shining adequately. "Everything's just right, Dad. The house is cleaner than ever. The food is perfectly cooked. The table is already set with our best china." "And the floor? Did you wax it properly? Did you check all the corners?" "I waxed everything very carefully, Dad. The furniture, the entire hallway, and I paid special attention to the staircase. It's shining like a mirror, it's so well cared for." He nodded with an air of cautious approval. "Very good. I'm going to take a shower and change into my formal clothes. Then I'll do my complete general inspection before the visitors arrive, to be absolutely sure that everything is perfect and I won't be embarrassed in front of Mr. Reynolds." My stomach gave a cold turn. I hadn't foreseen the possibility of him doing an early inspection before dinner. If he discovered the prepared steps before the right moment, my whole plan would fall apart. "Dad," I said quickly, trying to keep my voice casual and natural, "don't you think it's better to wait to inspect after the visitors leave? That way you don't risk dirtying anything before they arrive, and they won't see you inspecting the house as if you didn't completely trust my work." He stopped in the middle of the kitchen, looked at me with that typical distrust that appeared whenever anyone suggested any change in his sacred routine. "Why are you suggesting this? Since when do you care about what visitors will think of our family dynamics?" "Because I was so meticulous with the cleaning today. I did everything with such care that I'm absolutely sure you'll be satisfied and proud. And I thought it would be more elegant, more sophisticated to do the inspection afterwards, calmly without rush, like truly distinguished families do." He considered for a longer moment, stroking his graying mustache as he always did when pondering some important decision. Then he nodded slowly. "Makes sense. It really would be more appropriate and would demonstrate more social class. I'll wait until after they leave and we can do the evaluation with proper tranquility." I breathed a sigh of relief, but discreetly, trying not to show the enormous relief I felt. Now it was just a matter of patiently waiting for the moment of truth. At exactly 6 o'clock, punctual as important people always are, Mr. Reynolds and Mrs. Reynolds arrived in an elegant car. They were a distinguished-looking couple. He in a dark suit of fine fabric, felt hat and cane with a silver handle, she in a navy blue dress of imported fabric and a hand-knitted wool cardigan. They effusively praised the house, the careful decoration, and especially the presentation and flavor of the food. Dad was absolutely radiant, inflated with pride like a peacock on display, shamelessly boasting about how he had educated with a firm hand his daughter to be an exemplary future housewife. "Eliza is very domestic and obedient," he repeated to the guests whenever I appeared to serve a dish. "She knows how to take care of a house like few girls her age can these days." I always say that a rigorous education at home, with constant discipline and a firm hand, makes all the difference in the formation of feminine character. I smiled graciously and thanked the compliments with small, respectful bows, exactly as he had taught me for years. But inside, I was obsessively counting every minute that passed, anxious for them to leave so the real fun of the night could begin. The dinner extended for almost 2 full hours. They talked at length about the company's expanding business, about President Eisenhower's progressive politics, about the impressive transformations that were happening in the country with post-war prosperity, about the growth opportunities that were opening up for visionary men like them. I remained in the kitchen meticulously washing every piece of china that was used, but paying careful attention to every word of the conversation, watching Dad show off as the great, prosperous, and respected patriarch of the family, the man who knew how to command his house with unquestionable authority. Finally, around 8:30, after many mutual compliments and promises of future social and business meetings, the visitors warmly said goodbye. Dad accompanied them to the car, all solicitous and ceremonious, promising they would meet at the company the following Monday to discuss in detail some very promising business opportunities. When he returned inside the house, I was finishing carefully putting away the clean and dry dishes in the kitchen cabinet. Mom had already retired to her room, exhausted after the long day of preparations and the tension of receiving such important visitors. Arnold was locked in his room, studying for a difficult math test he would have on Thursday. "Very good, Eliza," Dad said, taking off his formal jacket and loosening his silk tie, with that air of absolute superiority and personal satisfaction that he always demonstrated after impressing important people. "Now the moment of truth has arrived. I'm going to check if you really put care into the cleaning as you promised, or if you're going to have to learn a few more lessons about domestic responsibility." He started in the dining room, then moved to the kitchen, inspecting every corner with the obsessive meticulousness of a detective looking for evidence of a crime. He ran his fingers over the furniture looking for microscopic dust, looked under the tables checking if I had swept adequately, examined the corners of the walls where dirt normally accumulated, opened some drawers looking for signs of internal disorganization. To my growing satisfaction, and for the first time in my entire life, he couldn't find absolutely anything to criticize. Everything was impeccable, organized, shiny. He grumbled, clearly disappointed and almost frustrated at not having discovered any flaw he could use as an excuse for a new humiliation session. "I'm going to check the upstairs bedrooms and bathroom more carefully. Then I'll come down to give my final verdict on your performance." My heart started racing uncontrollably. Finally, the moment of final reckoning had arrived, the time for my perfect revenge. He went up the stairs with heavy and determined steps. He hadn't stepped on the trap yet because he was going up, not down. The sound of his footsteps on the upper floor lasted almost 25 long minutes, during which he obsessively inspected his room, Arnold's, the upstairs bathroom, desperately searching for some microscopic flaw he could use to punish and humiliate me once more. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, motionless as a statue, waiting and observing every sound that came from above. My breathing was accelerated, my hands were damp with sweat, but inside I felt a strange and deep calm, as if I had finally found my true place in the world and knew exactly what my destiny was. Finally, I heard the familiar and threatening sound of his heavy footsteps approaching the top of the staircase. He was coming. He was coming down to give me the verdict of the most complete inspection of his life, as he did religiously every night for so many torturous months. I saw his dark shadow appear at the top of the stairs, outlined against the yellow light of the upstairs hallway. As always, like a sacred ritual of intimidation, he began to descend, stepping with exaggerated force, with all that characteristic arrogance, banging the soles of his shoes on the wood to make as much noise as possible and psychologically frighten me before even opening his mouth to speak. First step. His right foot slid slightly, almost imperceptibly, but he still managed to balance himself by holding onto the wooden handrail. I saw the expression of slight confusion pass over his face. Second step. Now he clearly realized that something was different, wrong. He tried to hold on better to the handrail with both hands, testing the next step more carefully, suspicious. Third step. That's when fate was finally fulfilled spectacularly. His foot slipped completely backward, as if there were no solid ground underneath, as if he had stepped on an invisible layer of pure ice. For a second that seemed to last an entire eternity, he was suspended in the air, completely unbalanced, his arms flailing desperately in the void, trying to grab onto something that could save him, his eyes wide with absolute surprise, terror, and total incomprehension. Then came the most satisfying fall I had ever witnessed in my life. He couldn't hold on, couldn't roll to protect himself. He simply fell face first, totally out of control, his face hitting with brutal force on the sharp edge of the fourth step, then bouncing to hit the fifth, then the sixth, in a terrible yet musical sequence of dry and definitive impacts against the solid wood. Each hit produced a horrible yet satisfying sound of bone breaking and flesh tearing. The sound of the fall was simultaneously terrible and the most beautiful music I had ever heard. A succession of dull, wet thuds, then another, until he reached the hallway floor with a final impact that made the whole house shake and several delicate objects fell from the shelves, shattering on the floor. Mom came running from the bedroom in her nightgown and slippers. Arnold came down stumbling still in pajamas, with a sleepy face. "My God in heaven! What was that terrible noise? Gerald!" Dad was stretched out on the waxed wooden floor, completely unconscious, his body in a strange and disjointed position, his face unrecognizably disfigured and covered with fresh blood that was starting to form a pool around his head. The mouth, that mouth that had humiliated me so many times, was completely destroyed. The front teeth had been ripped out and scattered across the floor by the brutal impact against the steps. The jaw was obviously broken and dislocated at an abnormal angle. The upper lip was deeply split from the mouth, almost reaching the base of the nose. "Call the doctor urgently!" Mom screamed desperately, kneeling beside him and trying uselessly to stop the abundant bleeding with the hem of her own nightgown. "Eliza, for God's sake, run get Dr. Patterson! Run! It could be very serious!" I ran out through the dark and silent streets of Elmwood, desperately knocking door to door until I managed to locate the doctor, but inside I was experiencing a deep, complete, and absolutely unprecedented satisfaction. While I ran through the cold night, with my heart beating with euphoria disguised as concern, I could only think with savage joy. Now you'll have all the time in the world to learn to use that destroyed mouth exclusively to stay quiet, dear Dad. The revenge had been executed with absolute perfection, and it tasted infinitely better than wax mixed with dirt and humiliation. After that night, my life changed completely. Dad spent 2 months in the hospital in Cedar Rapids. When he came back home, he couldn't speak properly anymore. His jaw was crooked, and he spoke slurred because of the teeth he lost. He could never again make those authoritarian shouts from before. Mom took command of the house, and I could finally breathe. I finished my studies, married at 20 to my dear Walter, who was a carpenter and treated me with all the affection in the world. We left Elmwood and went to live in Waterloo, where he had gotten a good job at a furniture factory. We had 3 beautiful children, Carol, Victor, and Teresa. I raised them with a lot of love, never raised my voice, never humiliated anyone. Walter helped me at home, shared the tasks with me. It was so different from what I had seen in my parents' house. In 1985, we returned to Elmwood. Walter wanted to retire here, close to family. We bought this little house where I live to this day, small but cozy. Dad had already died a few years earlier, from a stroke, ironically, without being able to speak a single word in his last days. Today, at 84 years old, I live a simple and happy life. I wake up every day at 6, have my coffee, take care of my garden. I have 7 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren who are the joy of my life. They come here every weekend, fill the house with laughter and mess, a good mess from a happy family. My granddaughter Emma helps me with the flowers. Just yesterday she asked, "Grandma, why do you always say everything can change?" I explained to her that in life, the most difficult situations can have a turnaround when we least expect it. I make my goodies to sell at the farmer's market: sugar cookies, cinnamon rolls, butter biscuits. It's a little extra income, but mainly I like to see people happy eating what I make with love. When someone compliments, my heart warms. On Sundays, the whole family gathers here. Carol brings the barbecue, Victor takes care of the drinks, Teresa makes the salad. We all sit at the big table that Walter made before he died, talking, laughing, the grandchildren running around the yard. Sometimes I look out the window and see the children playing barefoot on the grass, making mud pies near the hose, and I think how good life can be when it's based on love and respect. Nobody yells here. Nobody humiliates anybody. I keep the house always tidy, but now for pleasure, not out of fear. When I wax the floor, I smile, remembering how I learned to transform that suffering into strength. Each movement of the buffer is a victory over the past. At night, before sleeping, I thank God for giving me courage that July night. I don't regret anything. Sometimes life teaches hard lessons, but when we learn them, we become stronger. My neighbors respect me a lot. I'm known as Mrs. Eliza, the grandma who always has a kind word and a tasty treat. When someone is going through difficulties, they come here for tea and to talk. I have a peaceful routine now. Monday I do laundry, Tuesday I shop in town, Wednesday is general cleaning day, Thursday I prepare sweets for the market, Friday I visit friends, Saturday I receive family, Sunday is church and family lunch. My health is good for my age. I have some arthritis problems, but nothing that prevents me from taking care of the house and garden. The doctor always says I'm well because I have peace of mind. I sleep well, dream about good things. I never had nightmares again like I had during Dad's time. My conscience is clear because I know I did what needed to be done to protect myself. This little house in Elmwood is my refuge. Here I am, respected, loved, valued. Nobody forces me to do anything against my will. I choose when to clean, how to clean, if I want to clean. Freedom has a sweet taste that compensates for all the past suffering. When I look back, I see that scared 16-year-old girl became a strong woman, loving mother, dear grandmother. Life taught me that there's always a way out, always a way to change our situation. Today, while I water my flowers and listen to the pleasant sound of grandchildren playing, I thank each day of this new life I built with my own hands. And so we come to the end of our conversation today, my dear ones. I hope you understood that sometimes in life we need to make difficult decisions to protect ourselves. I'm not telling this story to teach violence, but to show that there's always a way out, even when it seems there's no hope. That July night in 1957 taught me that patience has limits, and when we reach that limit, we need to act. I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I'm just telling you what happened to me, like a grandmother who lived through a lot and wants to share her experiences. You who are young, who are beginning life, remember, nobody has the right to humiliate you, to take your dignity, to make you feel less than you are. It doesn't matter if it's father, mother, husband, boss, respect is sacred. Of course, today there are other ways to solve these problems. There are psychologists, social workers, police who protect those who suffer violence. In my time, there was none of that. It was every person for themselves, and I chose to defend myself the only way I could think of. My life after that night was built on love and respect. My children grew up knowing they were loved, that they had value, that they deserved to be treated with affection. My grandchildren are learning this too. That's how I break the cycle. With love. Today, when I see a mother yelling at her child at the grocery store or a husband mistreating his wife on the street, my heart tightens. I think about the child or woman who is suffering, and whenever I can, I give a word of support, a smile, a gesture of affection. You know what I discovered after all these years? That revenge didn't bring happiness. It brought justice. Happiness I built afterwards, day by day, with better choices, healthy relationships, a lot of work to heal the wounds of the soul. My garden, which you see here through the window, is a symbol of my new life. Each flower I plant is a day of freedom. Each rose that blooms is a morning without fear. Each vegetable I harvest is the taste of independence. I care for them with affection because I finally learned what it means to care out of love, not obligation. For you who are going through difficult situations at home, at work, in marriage, don't give up. Seek help, talk to someone you trust. Don't keep everything to yourself like I did. Today, There are so many people prepared to help those who are suffering. And always remember, you are valuable. You deserve respect. You deserve love. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Life can change when we least expect it, but it usually changes for the better when we have the courage to take control of our own story. Here I end my story, my dear ones. Thank you for listening to me with patience and affection. You don't know how good it is for an 84-year-old grandma to be able to share her memories with people who care. If you enjoyed our conversation, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. And comment below. Where are you watching from? What did you think of my story? Do you have any similar experience to share? I read all the comments and am very happy to hear from you. Sometimes I respond to some when I can work the computer well with the help of my granddaughter Emma. Next week I'm going to tell you about the day I met my late husband Walter, a much happier and more romantic story. It'll be a nice change of subject after today's heavy conversation. God bless you, my dear ones. May He protect and bless you always. And remember, life can always change for the better when we have faith and courage. A loving kiss from this grandma who already considers you part of the family. Until next week.